Okay, this is Nathan with Town Hall Project. With me is Congressman Joe Neguse of Colorado's 2nd District. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Of course, yeah, my pleasure.
It is a very warm day here in Washington, D.C. I wish we were doing this interview in the Rockies.
So do I.
So you are in this, from our perspective, incredible freshman class right now that is really setting a great standard for accessibility to constituents, and you're really leading the pack. My understanding is you've held 21 town halls this year so far?
That is right.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Why do you make it a priority to hold in-person meetings with your constituents?
Well, a couple reasons. So first, let me just say, I don't know that I'd say we're leading the pack, because I think, as you said, this freshman class, historic class, 63 very talented members of the House Democratic freshman class who are so engaged and are hosting town halls across the country each and every week. I am very lucky to be a part of this really historic class that I think is very engaged and trying to do their part in representing their constituents. From my perspective, we, at a very sort of early point in my tenure here in the House, decided that doing town halls would be really a cornerstone of my service. We learned so much. I learned so much from being able to be back in my community and to hear directly from the people that I represent. To hear their questions, their comments, their suggestions, their criticisms, right? To hear it all. Ultimately, to do the job that I was elected to do and that I'm so honored to be able to perform. To be a representative, you have to have a pulse on the community. And in my view, one of the best ways to do that is to be back home doing town halls, to have open forums where people have a chance to visit directly with their elected representative to tell them what they have to say. So they've been incredibly productive for us, and we've done, as you said, 21, and we intend to do a whole lot more. So.
That's great. We can't wait to see them. So one of the really innovative things you're doing, and I don't know if you're the first, or you're looking at another example, but these public service town halls, where you're combining kind of a service event with constituent engagement. Can you talk a little bit about how those came to be and what you get out of those?
Yeah, so first of its kind, right? So we've had 21 town halls, as you mentioned. Of them, 5 of them have been service town halls, right? And the idea is fairly straightforward, right? At town halls, as you know, right, sometimes can get a bit heated, right, as folks are debating the issues of the day, and that's okay. But our thought was, for those folks who might not want to go to a traditional town hall, and as I said, we do a lot of those, why not combine volunteerism with the town hall? And that is to say, have an opportunity for folks to come in, be able to ask me the tough questions and share their thoughts, but also, as part of that town hall, work together towards a common good and try to bridge the political divide. At our town halls, we have Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated voters show up and come in, and the idea of those folks working side by side to help a community good, right, to do some community service, to me, that is of incredible value. And it's interesting, we've had a really great reaction from folks who've attended the service town halls. We've done a few of them in Boulder, Colorado. I happen to live in Boulder County in Lafayette, and so we've done them at a homeless shelter. We also did a trail restoration project in Estes Park, one of the most beautiful places in the world, Rocky Mountain National Park, where, again, you had about 60 people, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, doing trail restoration together, literally lifting mulch and doing that for about an hour, and then afterwards being able to ask questions and have sort of the normal town hall experience. And I will say, I think it turned down the temperature a little bit in terms of being able to facilitate folks listening to each other, and that's what a town hall ultimately is all about. So we've enjoyed it, and there are a couple of local officials that are now also doing service town halls, kind of emulating what we've done, which was always the goal. The hope is that more people, will do them, and that it will, kind of catch fire, and more folks will end up doing these in their own communities across the country.
Yeah, we would love to see more of your colleagues follow this example. So, we're gonna let people know around the country that these are great. You should call your member of Congress and let them know. Service town hall. So you have done a few town halls with state lawmakers in Colorado,
Definitely.
correct? State representatives.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, I think a lot of people think of Congress is doing one thing, our state government's doing another. Why is it important to you to sometimes do events with state representatives?
A number of reasons. One, for the convenience of the people that we represent, right? I mean, I think the idea of a town hall and kind of bringing government to the people, right, so that folks can understand what we are doing here in the federal government and the work that we're trying to accomplish on their behalf. At the end of the day, having state representatives, state leaders, as well as local leaders, municipal leaders in some cases, at the town halls to jointly present, it gives voters and the people, ultimately the citizens, an opportunity to hear from a broader swath of the folks that are representing them. And that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
In addition, you want to have your state and local and federal leaders all working together collaboratively and cooperatively. Doesn't mean that they're always going to agree, but at the end of the day, to the extent that they are working together towards a common good, that only inures to the benefit of the people that they represent. So for us, it has been incredibly productive to be able to have joint town halls with our state senators and state representatives, in some case my own state senator and state representatives in my own community, so that, again, folks can be able to hear the work that's happening at the state level, the work that's happening at the federal level, how that work interplays, and ask questions of both sort of sets of elected officials. So those town halls have been really, really helpful in my view, from what I've heard from constituents.
Yeah, that's great, and that's a kind of a cool thing you bring up, is that you represent your congressional district, but you are in fact represented by. You
That's
are
right.
A constituent of your state representatives too.
That's exactly right.
So
I have my own, city councilor and mayor and state senator and state representative, and I would ask them about the work they're doing in the state legislature, to protect the community that I'm lucky to call home. So
that's terrific. So returning to Congress here, you are a member of this 116th Congress. This House has passed a lot of legislation.
Yes.
A lot of it has not really gone anywhere in the Senate. This being your first time in Congress, is that frustrating? Is that kind of what you expected? Are there takeaways you would come out of that?
It's deeply frustrating. I always anticipated some level of dysfunction in the Congress, from what I had kind of read long before I was elected. But I did expect more, in the sense of, here in the House, we follow regular order. One of the first, kind of orders of business for the Speaker and for the majority, when we took the majority, was to institute regular order, which means, bills go through a normal process. They get a hearing, they get a markup where amendments from both sides of the aisle are proposed and debated, and then they get a vote on the floor of the House, right? And people are able to express their opinions, and you let the chips fall where they may on a particular bill. The bill rises or falls on its merits. And unfortunately, that is not the way in which the Senate is functioning right now. And while the Senate has always worked at a more glacial pace than the House, this is unprecedented in the view of many constitutional experts, where you have just bill after bill after bill being sent over to the United States Senate and simply sitting there without any action. I think that's a terrible mistake. I think it's inconsistent with the way in which our republic is supposed to function. And ultimately, irrespective of how folks might feel about a given issue, in my view, you ought to want to have a bill be heard and ultimately have your elected representatives take a position on a particular bill. And so, I'm hopeful that the Senate will change its ways. In Colorado, interestingly enough, we have a constitutional amendment that mandates in Colorado a variety of different things, but one of which is that every bill gets a hearing. And so in the state legislature, and again, whether it's a Republican bill, a Democratic bill, good idea, bad idea, the idea gets vetted and gets a public airing. And I think that system makes a whole lot more sense to me than the current predicament we find ourselves in.
Yeah, well, hopefully some progress happens sooner rather than later. Last question is, I think, even Americans who were particularly engaged in politics can really only follow 2 or 3 things that Congress is doing at once. But I know, many members have a lot of things going on. Are there things you're working on that might not be, Washington Post headline, kind of the biggest bill going on, things that are important to you that you want to highlight for people?
Yeah, from our perspective, our team has been so kind of singularly focused on being responsive to our constituency, right? And so the reason we've had so many town halls is so that I can get a sense, in part, right, as to how people are feeling in the community and what they'd like me to work on. And as I've traveled various cities in my district, everywhere from kind of the Front Range communities, Boulder, Fort Collins, northern Colorado, to the Central Mountains, Breckenridge, Vail, elsewhere, I hear a number of different kind of common themes. And so those common themes that have emerged have formed the basis of our legislative work. And so in terms of the focus, the threat of climate change, which is really existential, in which my communities in Colorado are sort of already experiencing the impacts of climate change in a very visceral way. And so we're working really aggressively on that front. I serve on the select committee on the climate crisis. I've introduced a number of bills around regenerative agriculture, right, and solar energy development. And so that's a big focus of ours. Protecting public lands. Again, in our district, for you, having been to Colorado, and for those viewers who have come to Colorado, know that we have some of the most iconic national parks and public lands in the country and in the world. And so protecting those lands, we have introduced a number of different bills to further protect public lands. Those are very important. And then affordable housing. We have, although the economy is doing well in the state, a lot of folks are struggling in this economy to be able to afford to live in these communities that, as I said, that we're so lucky and blessed to be able to call home. So we've introduced some bipartisan bills to try to increase affordable housing, to make it easier for folks to be able to live in the communities that are their home. And so those are all bills that we're working very hard on, and we're going to continue to push.
That's great. I think you were just named most productive freshman or something like that by Quorum. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, is that right? No,
yeah,
I didn't see
I think
that.
you've introduced the most bills of any freshman.
Oh,
so,
all right.
I don't know if anyone in your staff has that info, but
Yeah,
I was just checking you out before we got in. So I think you're setting a high bar both in Washington and back home in your district, which is, from our perspective, about all you can ask for. So keep up the great work, and thank you so much for taking the time today.